Interval and set builder notation. Express the following in set builder notation and graph the interval on a number line. We have -1 to 8. Set builder notation is written in this form. So the left side of the bar tells us what variable we're defining, and then the right side tells us what numbers x can equal. Since we have two numbers here, I'm going to have x in the middle, and I'm going to have two inequality signs on each side of the x. Now if I look at the left side, my smaller number is always on the left, and I have a -1. Now, x can be greater than -1 because it goes up to 8. So the mouth of my inequality sign is going to be opening to the x. That means that x can be greater than -1, which is a true statement according to my interval. Now, since I have a bracket next to my -1, that tells me that -1 is included in the set. So I need to put a line underneath my inequality sign. Next, I'll look at the 8. Now, x can be less than 8 because it goes to -1. So that tells me that this is going to be a less than sign, and I'll write my 8. Now, a parenthesis is next to the 8 in interval notation. Parenthesis means that the number is not included in the set. So I'm not going to have a line underneath my less than sign. It's just going to be a less than sign. There's no line underneath it. This is my answer in set builder notation. Now I want to graph this interval on a number line. So I'll draw a number line, and I can put 0 in the middle, and I want to make sure to include enough marks so I can graph the number 8, and then I also want to graph the -1. First, you need to find -1 and 8 on the number line. Next, we'll look at -1. Now, my interval told me that -1 was included in the set, so I'm going to put a bracket at the -1 mark. Now, x is between -1 and 8, so this is going to keep on going until I reach a +8. Now, my 8 is not included in the set, so I need to put a parenthesis at the 8 mark. And then we'll draw a thick line between the two numbers to show that x can be any value between those two numbers. And that's my answer for the graph. Express the interval in set builder notation and graph the interval on a number line. Here we have -∞ to 2.2. And remember, the smaller number is always on the left, the larger is always on the right. Now, since I have an infinity sign and a number, that tells me that I'm going to have x is greater than or less than that 2.2. So the x isn't going to be in the middle of two numbers like we saw in the previous question because that infinity is there. Now this interval is telling me that x ranges from -∞ all the way to 2.2. So x is less than 2.2 because it can go as small as it wants, but it can only get as big as 2.2. And my sign is a less than sign because there is a parenthesis next to the 2.2. If this was a bracket, I would put a line underneath the inequality sign, but there isn't one, so this is my answer in set builder notation. Now I'm going to graph this on a number line. To graph it, you'll just find 2.2 on your number line. And 2.2 is not included in the set, so we're just going to write that with a parenthesis. And x can be any value less than 2.2, so I'm going to shade a left arrow, a left pointing arrow on my line here. And I put an arrow at the end to indicate that x can go all the way to negative infinity. Use graphs to find the set. Okay, this is a union, so this tells me I'm going to take the smallest number and the largest number of either set, and that's going to be my answer. So, to do this, we want to graph both intervals and then take the union. First, I'll graph -7 to 6. So I'll plot a -7. That number is not included, so I'll put a parenthesis, and that's going to go all the way to 6. We'll say it's around here. And 6 is also not included, so I'm going to put a parenthesis on it. And x can be any value between those two. So that's my first interval. My second interval is -1. So we'll put a -1 here to 9. Now at the -1 is included. So I'm going to put the bracket, and that goes all the way to 9, which is also included. So my second interval is represented by the red. Now the union means that I want to take all the numbers between the two sets. So I'm going to look at my lowest value and my highest value of either set. So the union of these graphs is the -7, which is not included, so I put parenthesis, and it goes to the 9, which is included, so I put brackets. So the answer is -7 to 9.